Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm thrilled to welcome Andrew Campbell to the podcast today to talk about a big one, the debut feature film of Wes Craven, The Last House on the Left, released 50 years ago in August of 1972. How are we doing, Andrew?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to talk about this film, but also, of course, all of Wes Craven's films that he did throughout his career. Because, yeah, he's a very, as you know, I'm sure, very influential man.
Yes, he's one of my all-time favorites. I got to work for his company many years ago. I got to meet
Yeah.
him. And I've been studying all of his films, even his lesser work, some of the lesser films he did in the 80s. And I'm really enamored with the first two he made in the 70s, which were really influential to the genre. Last House on the Left from 72 and The Hills Have Eyes from 77 really just set his career on fire right from the beginning. And this was a man who didn't necessarily want to make horror films. Like, he was interested in doing comedies and dramas. And basically, I don't know how much you know about the making of Last House, but he basically was told, here's $90,000. We want you to make a horror film. And Wes Craven was like, I haven't even seen that many horror films. I don't even know what to do here. And so that's kind of how it started. This is not someone who grew up loving genre films and seeing all the slasher stuff and I wish one day I can become a horror film director. He just kind of like slid into this, wanted to work in film, obviously, but like did not expect to make these kinds of movies. And Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes were so influential, had such a directorial stamp on the genre that it was very difficult for him to get out of the genre. After he had made Hills Have Eyes, it was like he would try to do other things and no one would go for it. And then after Nightmare on Elm Street, that was it. Like, he
Oh,
was
yeah.
basically a horror director, and he only got one chance really at the end of his career, towards the end of his career, in making Music of the Heart with Meryl Streep, just
Yeah.
because Scream was so successful. They wanted to sign him up for a bunch of Dimension films, and the Weinstein brothers said, we'll give you one other kind of genre movie if you want to do a drama. And so he ended up doing Music of the Heart. But we really look to the beginning of his career now to see kind of how things got started. So tell me about your history with this movie. I know you said before we started recording that you had seen the remake before, but like going into watching this 72 Last House on the Left, like kind of what was your thinking behind it? What did you know about it?
So I really knew nothing about the original one.
Mm-hmm.
I always knew that I've always heard of it 100%, 1,000 times. And then I know of the movie with Jennifer Lawrence, House at the End of the Street. Everyone thought that was a remake of that movie.
Yeah.
And I always said, no, there's Last House on the Left and House at the End of the Street. They're two very different movies. Even though I'd never seen the original one, but I knew that I knew they were different. And yeah, I knew Wes Craven had done it, and that it was like, from the 70s. I never really knew much about it. And when, I'd only seen the remake up until, 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
And so, I only had experience with the remakes, and I knew how brutal it was. And because it made me super uncomfortable watching it. And so then getting, to see the original, I was kind of like, oh, this is still a very brutal movie. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
And I also loved, the aspect of like the turning of the tables of, the villains are now becoming the hunted. And I love that whole thing. It's so different. And it's putting these, very typical loving parents and like, pushing them to their limits and doing things unthinkable. And that's, a pretty fun concept. And I think even looking at, later on, The Hills Have Eyes, it's like a very similar concept of like a family that is never, been involved in these situations, are now like taking matters in their own hands because they're gonna have to. And it gets brutal. Like, but yeah, it's all bad. Like, and I'm
in a good way.
It's funny because when I was watching the original one, I was just like, I wanted some changes. I was just like, I mean, I was hoping the her friend wasn't gonna die because I liked her friend a lot. And then I was just like, I know it's gonna happen anyway. And
Phyllis, you're talking about Phyllis, the one who
Phyllis,
gets
yeah,
close to the street, the most
yeah,
like maddening scene in the movie. She's gotten away. She can see
so
the
close.
street and she's just like quietly walking, no energy. And I'm
I'm
like,
like, you're almost there.
move your ass.
Exactly. And you know what? That scene reminded me of, I mean, of course, I'm always going back to Scream when Drew Barrymore was so close to the road and she sees her
Oh
parents
yeah.
and she
Mm-hmm.
doesn't make it. Now, Drew Barrymore gave an effort I mean, she didn't give too much of an effort because she hadn't been stabbed yet, I don't think.
She can't say her mom. She goes, mom, like
Yeah.
she can't get it
Yeah.
out like when she sees them walking up the
Yeah.
porch
And that
steps.
was that part always like gives me chills. But like in Last House on the Left, I was like, I don't think she'd been stabbed yet in that part. So I was just like, she's just tired. I was like, adrenaline, come on, let's get moving.
I mean, it's something that we deal with in all the horror films, right? Because it's like, well, if they get to the street and they get away, then it kind of then the movie's over. Like
Oh yeah.
we have to prevent her from getting there. So, but yeah, that's when I had like four things about the movie that I put my orange, like I don't know about this. And I mean it's pretty maddening when she's that close and she's just like slowly wandering as if maybe sometimes like, well, maybe she thinks she got away, like maybe she thinks they're not even close, like maybe that's what
Yeah.
she's thinking, but still, like they've been in this horrendous circumstance, like you think you would just press on, just
Yeah.
get out and make sure you're safe. I don't know.
And you know what? Thinking of and then the following scene with Mary when she's going super slow and she
Mm,
hadn't been hurt in any way, but I think like because she had just been raped by the horrible men
mhm.
and like she's going so slow and just like walking
Into
and
the
it's
lake,
somewhat
you mean?
into the
That
lake and
part?
everything. Yeah, and that part like I mean it was so heartbreaking because it's like she's just kind of you know she's lost her innocence is gone and
Yeah.
she's just uh so traumatized by this and like her walking slowly I was like you know what you kind of like I understood it a little more
Yeah, no, that part makes
versus
sense.
yeah versus Phyllis I was like I was like you got an opportunity to go and just like and her personality is much different I feel like
Mhm.
Phyllis has probably been through some stuff she's very tough woman and so to see her almost make it and then not I was like kind of yeah we're like we're mad at her we're like no like you were so close.
Yeah. This is a very unusual movie. Watching it again, I hadn't seen it in a while, but I'm just like, it's very amateur. I think that's part of its
Yeah.
charm. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are parts of this movie where the camera is just kind of like still, and there'll be three actors in the shot, and one of them's like halfway out of the frame, and I'm like, I mean, there's like you can tell this is his first go at it. He's figuring things out. By Hills Have Eyes, we get a little bit more cinematic, right?
Mm-hmm.
The film stock looks a little bit better, and then once we get into the 80s, then it looks more clean, and we
Yeah,
get like
for sure.
one of the most cinematic horror films of all time, which is Nightmare on Elm Street from
Yeah.
'84. So he learned things pretty quickly, but this first time out, you can tell he's just like, what do I do with the
Yeah,
camera?
for absolutely.
And editing sometimes, like that
Yeah.
when he tries to cross cut between two things happening, that's sometimes kind of jerky. And but again, I think it's part of the movie's charm, like you knowing what was to come after this, and
Yeah.
especially these themes he continued to deal with, the one you mentioned, the idea of like the good people in the movie, the protagonists who are pushed to being monsters just like the villains, right?
Yeah.
These parents are not two people you would expect to be wielding chainsaws and slashing throats, but when their daughter is killed by these guys and they're staying in their house, like any parent could identify with that feeling of rage. And so
Oh
that's
yeah.
something he deals with in Hills Have Eyes and Nightmare, in Scream, in all sorts of his movies. Like the idea of
Yeah.
good people pushed into being violent is in all of
Absolutely.
his
Yeah.
movies, all the way
Oh
to
yeah.
the
And
end.
then and I was watching just like little videos of Wes Craven earlier and then some of his later movies turned into like deal with family trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Like not even, you know, it was played with Scream and then with Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like dealing with things that happen within your family from the past that kind of coming to terms with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of they were kind of going on a discussion about how like his family, Wes Craven's family, was very religious and very like
Yes.
conservative and hardcore, and it was kind of his way of like expressing that, I guess, and like dealing with his own maybe family trauma in a way.
Yeah, let's dig into the kind of the history
Yeah.
of this movie and the beginning of Wes Craven's career. I actually wrote a screenplay in 2018 called Craven, and it's about his transition from being a college professor. I think he was around 30, 29, 30 years old. And he said, you know what? I'm going to bounce. I'm not going to be in academia anymore. I'm going to go to New York and try to become a filmmaker. He went to New York for a summer, couldn't get a job, came back. I think he was a high school teacher for 1 or 2 years. And then he said, am I just going to do, is this all I'm going to do? Let's try one more time. He went back and he got these little nothing jobs, but he did at one point start to work for Sean Cunningham, who was making a movie called Together. And I think he was just like syncing up dailies and just doing little minute things for that movie. But he got to be very friendly with Sean Cunningham. And Together did well enough that they were given the chance to make another movie from the same company that had given them money for Together. And Sean Cunningham knew Wes Craven wanted to direct something. And so they got enough money to make it had to be a horror film. But Sean Cunningham said, here's your chance, Wes, write it and you can direct it. Let's make a $90,000 horror film. And the movie that they did was Last House on the Left, which is based on The Virgin Spring, a famous
Yeah.
Ingmar Bergman drama, which I finally watched 3-4 years ago. I did a binge on a bunch of Ingmar Bergman, which I don't recommend. His work is
Good to know. Good to know.
his work is no, not to say that you shouldn't watch his stuff, but it's not. I like over a summer I just watched a bunch of them, and I'm like, this is too much to take. Like he makes the kind of movies that you have to sit with for a month.
Okay.
You can't just like watch one after another. But I was very excited to watch The Virgin Spring, and there are similarities to just the basic narrative. Like you can tell that it's clearly, that Last House on the Left is influenced by what Ingmar Bergman did on Virgin Spring. And so that's kind of his college professorial, stance on the material. I'm going to make this dirty horror film, but it's going to be based on this classic foreign film by Bergman, which is really cool. And then, yeah, I mean, they shot it really quickly, just a few weeks of shooting and mostly amateur actors. I think only like the parents, maybe one other was like a trained actor of any kind, had like any significant credits. I think that brings a lot of power to the movie too, that we're not watching this 50 years on and, oh, we recognize those three people. I think like, especially those main actors, the two women who get killed and the bad guys, of like, we knew even one of them, I think the magic would be erased. Like it would feel weird. The fact that we don't really know who anyone is in this movie makes it better, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I mean, it's just more relatable for, I guess, for the audience. It's like, that could be anyone, and it could be me.
Yeah. So Sean Cunningham obviously went on to direct one of the the classic horror films, Friday the 13th from 1980. And then I love this detail, and I even wrote a couple scenes into my script. The production assistant on Last House on the Left was Steve Miner, who went on to direct Friday the 13th 2 and 3 and Halloween H2O and a bunch of movies, Lake Placid, and he made some dramas, Forever Young with Mel Gibson and Jamie Lee Curtis. And
cool.
he started as a PA on Last House on the Left, which is really neat. They shot it in New York City, also shot some scenes in Connecticut. Like I think all the forest stuff, like all the middle part of the movie is Connecticut. And David Hess, who plays Krug, like the tall, like the really intimidating figure of the villains, he recalled that much of the cast bonded during the filming, since they were mostly inexperienced actors. Sandra Peabody, who plays Mary, she was often treated differently than the rest of the cast, to the point that Craven recalled there was not much acting being done during the shooting of the film's violent scenes. That's like kind of creeps me out. The idea that anyone on this set was uncomfortable in any way in terms of like their relationships with the other actors. And Craven is such a warm presence, and everything you hear actors say about him, on Scream and stuff, just like he's not who you expect. He's very warm and just a really, really dignified presence. He's very soft spoken. So it's I read some of the stuff and here's something I'm like, I mean, it was a different time. They shot this in 1971. No one knew who Wes Craven was yet. Maybe he hadn't quite developed his skills as a director to make the cast feel safe, or at least to
Yeah.
some extent. But these scenes in the middle of the movie are very violent and very disturbing. And the way it's shot, it feels like it's really happening. And so the idea that Sandra Peabody, who played Mary, was not acting that much during those scenes, it almost gives the movie more power, but not in a way that it should. Like, we shouldn't feel as an audience that these actors are actually suffering in any way. So that's kind of a sticky situation.
That is, and that I didn't know that, and I mean, and looking back, I mean, those scenes were so brutal, and I mean, it's surprising that that these actors hadn't really hadn't been acting before, because I mean, Mary was so good, and I mean, maybe that helped Wes Craven kind of develop into, I need to be more protective of my cast and more of my crew, because maybe he learned from that right away, and he was sure like, okay, and it is really, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to watch it now again, or watch those scenes again, as awful as they are, and maybe I might catch on to that a little more, because I just thought they were pretty good actors.
That's when you watch a movie, typically it's just acting that you're watching. It's very rare that you're watching a movie where the actor in the middle of the frame is actually being terrified. And like, I don't think she was like afraid for her life or anything, but I think there was a weird disconnect with some of the other actors, especially the villainous characters. And I think she actually feared at least Krug, the main guy, who he's a big guy. Yeah, I could see. But yeah, I think it's really fascinating that Wes Craven grew up in this environment where it was very strict and like could not watch movies. Like, I guess his parents allowed him occasionally to watch an animated G-rated Disney film, and that was it. And he said it wasn't until he was in college or just after college that he actually started seeing real movies. I think he said his first experience with a non-Disney movie was To Kill a Mockingbird. I think he said that's the first real movie he saw, and then he was hooked and wanted to see everything. But to just think that like his parents would not let him do anything controversial, including watch movies, and then he goes on to make Last House on the Left, which I have been watching 6, 7, 8 horror films for the podcast since January, of 72 horror films, and nothing is in the realm of what takes place in Last House. Like, there's nothing, not even 20-30% as violent, as sadistic, as controversial at all. They're all so safe. Outside of maybe Frenzy by Hitchcock, which we talked about a few weeks ago. That movie has some moments of controversy, but like, I mean, I can see why people were fainting and vomiting in the aisles when they saw this in 72. Nobody had seen anything like this. I mean, imagine.
I mean, because I was thinking that when I was watching, I was like, this is 72 and they're showing like these, graphic rape scenes. And then also when the guy was like, after they just killed Phyllis and they're like pulling her intestines out, I think that's what they were doing. It was such a quick little spot, and I was just
it's brief.
I was like, are they? And then of course her hand was cut off. And I, when I was watching a little documentary on Wes Craven afterwards, and they were saying how just like horrified people were, and how people almost like shunned Wes Craven for like putting this on camera. Like they were they were angry at him for like even
making it,
and then then what was it, 5 years later he did
think of that. So 5 years.
5 years later. I don't know, he still had some pretty brutal scenes. He definitely toned it down a little bit, but it was crazy to see that from a 1972 movie, because I was watching it and I watched some of it on the treadmill, and then I had to like
you're on the treadmill watching this?
I was on the treadmill, and I was just like, I'm gonna face my phone down and not like, I was like, I don't want anyone else to see this right now. Cause I mean, I didn't, I didn't expect, you know, the gut pulling scene
Yeah.
that got me like hard. Oh, and in the hand, when he pulled the hand out, oh my God, that just
Yeah. But
unexpected, which was
so
good.
it's like, so for many years before this movie, he's like not allowed to see stuff. And then he makes this really just disturbing horror film. And then one of the reasons why it took him 5 years before Hills Have Eyes was that he was developing other projects. I know he wrote a couple comedies, a couple dramas. He was trying to get stuff off the ground. And maybe my favorite scene that I wrote in my Craven script a few years ago was the scene where he has a new girlfriend and he goes out to dinner and he meets her parents and they're sitting and it's very, it's nice, it's going well. And then they ask, so what do you do, Wes? And he's like, oh, I made a film. And the girlfriend's like, don't talk about it. And and he says, and they ask him what it was. He was like, oh, it's called The Last House on the Left. And they like the parents just like are horrified. And I think at one point they're like, you can't date him, like get out, we have to leave. And it becomes this big scene. And like, and all the like the teachers he used to work with like would disown him, like, oh, we don't want to know you made that sick, disturbing movie. And so that was hard for him. In the interview I watched last night, he talked about how he was not prepared for the controversy. Like he thought the movie would just kind of come and go. It's a credit on the resume. Now I can direct something else. And he was not prepared. Cunningham wasn't prepared for just people going nuts. I mean, people were like running down the aisles demanding that they stop playing the movie. There were cities where there were like people saying, you can't show this movie here. Like it was crazy. Like people were going nuts in a negative way about this movie. And Craven was not prepared for that. And so it was really hard for him to like try for a second movie for a while because nobody wanted to work with him. And it was tough. It's like not a great way to start your film career in a way, but people knew of the movie. So there was that. It wasn't like, I guess in one way it could have been worse if he had made a movie that no one saw. True. And then no one, like 2 years later, like you say the title, no one knows what it is. I think in some respects that might have been worse. Like at least people like knew of it, but it was still hard for him to try to develop anything outside the horror genre. I think Hills Have Eyes was a case where he finally buckled down, had no money, couldn't pay his rent. And they said, we have money to make a horror film. And he went, okay,
I'll do it.
I don't think he wanted to make Hills Have Eyes at first but then made a great movie. So.
Oh yeah, it was so good. And I mean, I guess like, there's no such thing as bad press, I guess. Cause I mean,
yeah, exactly.
It's iconic now. And
it was a hit too. It cost $90,000 and it made a few $1 million. I mean, it did very well at the end of the day.
And it's funny just to think of what would have to happen in the movie now in order for that kind of reaction to happen.
Nothing.
I can't think of anything. Like now we're pretty desensitized as a nation in the world, and we're just like, anything goes. Midsommar was like one of the most brutal movies I've seen in my entire life, and I was like, I didn't protest. I was like, that's still a pretty good movie. I wouldn't say no. I'll see his other movies too.
Like maybe if Lars von Trier made a film that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival and it was like Meryl Streep and Helen Mirren having like graphic lesbian sex scenes for 2 hours, and then they put the movie out on 4,000 screens across the country, maybe that would get some.
That could get some press.
Like taking like two very dignified Academy Award winning older actresses and have them do like really like dirty stuff for 2 hours. Like that's the only thing I could even think of that could get that kind of reaction today. Like I really don't. I think we're at a place now. People consume their content in 1,000 different ways. It's not like it was 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think you'd have to make something really, really weird, offbeat, disgusting to stand out today.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You have Shudder, which gets movies every month from all sorts of sources. And, that's just horror films. And so
Yes, I pay for Shudder, and I have not used it yet.
you haven't used it yet? It's so great.
I went through a bunch. And I was like, I don't want to watch any of these movies right now. And then I'm still paying for it. I probably need a. I need a. Well, because I'm a person who I just rent them, or if it's a movie I'm never gonna watch again, I will rent it for like $2.99 or whatever. But then I just like to buy movies. I like to buy them on DVD. I always like whenever I'm at Goodwill or something, I always go to the DVDs to see what. Almost like if I saw Last House on the Left or something like that on DVD, like, oh yeah, I'm grabbing that. Like I'll watch it again eventually. I just want to have it because I don't know. It's like it's like I'll like be walking by my shelf and be like, oh, that's a good movie. I'm gonna watch that now. Like I don't know. When I see it, it makes me want to watch more and more even movies. So yeah, I don't know. I like to buy movies a lot.
Yeah, I do too. I like audio commentaries and documentaries, and you typically don't find those on streaming outside of maybe like Criterion Channel. Like usually you have to buy the movie on DVD or Blu-ray. And I actually read last night that in 2018, they released Last House on the Left, the original, on a 3-disc Blu-ray, which has 3 different versions of the movie.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, what? I read a little bit up on, I guess there's some deleted scenes that you can't necessarily find readily available. I looked on YouTube. I'm like, oh, maybe they're on YouTube. I'd love to see some of the stuff. And like one said, there's a scene that they shot and was in one of the early cuts where the parents find their daughter before she dies. Like, and they have a scene of dialogue. And then the daughter dies, and then they go back to the house and wreak havoc. Like that kind of changes the nature of the movie if they find her before she dies. I think that would have been. Isn't that in the remake, if I remember right?
So in the
find the daughter or no?
So in the remake, the daughter survives. She does not die.
Oh, okay. She comes back to the house.
I'm like, yeah. So she wanders back to the house.
Does she die?
She survived. She does. I don't think she dies. No, I'm pretty sure she survives.
So why are they going nuts on the bad guys? Because like of the acts that they committed.
Yes.
Even though she didn't actually die, they're so revolted by the acts they committed that they go to town.
Yeah, because they shot her. I think they shot her once or twice. And of course they raped her. And they're like, and then they're like, oh yeah, well, and you know what? I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I've liked her surviving more. I feel like for me that would cause more rage because you would see what pain they were in. Right. And like just seeing what they had become. Like, finding your daughter, dead is horrible. But I think there's gonna be like the grief is gonna hit instantly, and you're gonna be, just mourning her. But like if you see her in so much pain, I would lose. I feel like I would personally would just go even more crazy and do way more horrible things if I found out and got to hear and see what you did. Oh my God. Which is what, when I was watching the remake, I was telling my boyfriend, I was like, oh yeah, like this happens. And then like she wanders back to the house and she's whatever. So when I watched the remake, I was like, oh my God, no, she's dead. And I was like, that's not that's a change I didn't really expect. So it was kind of funny to see watching, some of the movies in reverse when like I'm when
the remake first.
When I was a kid and I was like, I watched the remake because I don't care about the original one. And so it is kind of fun to go back and see what changes have been done and like what were better, what were worse. Because expecting her to survive and then her not was actually very shocking to me watching this now, the original one.
Yeah, you talk about the emotion. I think if there's one major element lacking from the 72 original, it's that lack of emotion. There's not like scenes of catharsis. There's not a scene of the parents really reckoning with together through dialogue what they've discovered and what happened, having a moment with the daughter. Like it is kind of like it works on a certain level in terms of its violence and its realism. But I do feel like at 84 minutes that the original movie could have had a few more scenes where at least we get a little bit more emotion from the parents, like of what's going on. I think we get that a lot more in the remake. These are just some nitpicky things. It's his first movie, $90,000, mostly amateur cast. So he couldn't really have like amazing acting in some of these scenes. He probably recognized that and was like, I can only do so many things well in this first movie. So I get it. But watching it again last night, I'm like, yeah, that's what's kind of that's what I'm looking for that I'm not getting, is some of that emotion throughout the movie. It seems like it's
Yeah.
kind of on a surface level for most of the running time.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And I think I know one part that threw me off in the movie as well was why they put their daughter face down on the couch. It
Oh
always threw.
yeah.
I was just like, she's dead, and I was like, oh, maybe she'll like wake up. Maybe she's not actually dead because I kept on waiting for her to be alive again. And I was just like, I wouldn't put my dead daughter face down on the couch. It's a little heartless.
Yeah.
And yeah, I agree. I think had we seen them, have a little bit more. I think a goodbye, yeah, like you said, like in that deleted scene. I would love to see that deleted scene because I think that could definitely add on just some more emotion, and I think it would also help build up the rage even more with the
Yeah.
parents. I love the mom. She was kicking
Gorgeous.
ass.
And
Oh
yeah.
yeah. She's gorgeous. Yes.
Yeah.
So pretty. She has great hair. And then I mean, she was just like, I'm gonna seduce this man and bite his penis off. And I was like, loved it. I loved it.
We get that great shot of her head just shaking wildly, and I'm like, okay, Wes, let's go there.
Yeah. And that scene also came on while I was on the treadmill. And I was like shaking. I was like no. I was like, stop, that's don't do that. So I was just like, if I'm reacting this way and I've seen horrible things, I can't imagine what it's like in the 70s. Oh my God.
Imagine if you've been watching that on an airplane and there was like kids around you, like watching their Disney content, and they look over at what you're watching.
Oh, we were
You're like, oh my God.
I just flew to Portland, and my boyfriend and I were watching The Boys on Amazon on the plane.
Okay.
And it was the Hero-gasm episode where it's basically a big orgy. And I was like, Evan, you need to lay this. I was like, please. I was like, this is too much.
We haven't gotten to that episode yet.
Oh yeah, I was like, we need to not. There are kids who are here, and I do not want to watch this in front of them. And then, of course, it was funny because then the guy diagonal from me was watching Stranger Things, the last 2 episodes, and I was like, I can't look at that because I don't like spoilers.
Oh, that's right. That's happened to me too. Like where someone next to you on the plane is watching something you haven't watched yet, and you want to, and you're like, oh God, don't play that.
It's hard to look away.
Yeah. I feel like that's never been a thing on an airplane. I've never heard like someone say, oh, and by the way, if you're watching extremely graphic R-rated content, do not display it for the children around you. It's like I don't think they care. I don't know.
I guess not.
You don't hear about it. But yeah, Last House on the Left. I have lots more trivia here, but I thought let's just kind of dig into just like our main thoughts on the movie. So like just in general, kind of like what were your thoughts? What did you like? What did you not like?
Yeah. I definitely enjoyed the even though it didn't fit very well for a horror movie, I liked that he was interpreting or putting in all of these like modern day music every little scene. He's like, I'm just gonna start playing this famous song. I'm sure it was famous in the 70s or somehow. And I was like, well, this isn't very horror like, but okay, like it didn't come off as a horror movie at first.
For a while.
For a while. I mean, even during like those, when the girls are kidnapped and and hostage and everything and in the woods, they're still playing like this groovy, funky music.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what is this? And in my head, I was interpreting, oh, maybe he's trying to make it to where like, this is still everyday life and like making it as real as possible. So he's playing music that's like would be playing then. Oh, right. So like make it more relatable. It made me think of Scream a little bit when they play, Don't Fear the Reaper and everything in there. That gave me I was like, oh, like
Red Right Hand.
I relate everything. Yeah, and we play all that. And I was like, oh, like this is all I think of now. The editing was extremely choppy.
Yeah,
it was
pretty rough.
Like there were so many like time jumps. I was like, wait, when did we get here? And like, how did they find the daughter in the big lake? And yeah, the editing was a little poor. It was just it was just jump cut, and I was a little lost. One edit I did like that he was doing whenever like someone mentions a character like in the opening, when like they mention Mary and they cut to Mary, every time they say Mary, they go back to her real fast. So every time you hear
Oh
a
yeah.
name, you get a flash over it.
Mhm.
I thought that was really cool because he also did it with the of course the bad people with escaped prison when they were listening to their radio in the car and they mentioned them and they're like there's a woman who looks like an animal and they flash and show her for like 2 seconds
Mhm.
and there's another man they show him for 2 seconds. It's kind of like letting them. I don't know. It's kind of cool to those little cuts are really fun. Um, Now I feel like in today's standards, people wouldn't really like that because I feel like we don't want to see these people very much. We like to see. I don't know. We like the idea of what we create in our heads, not what we see,
Mm.
what they actually look like. So there was a lot of screen time for these villains.
Mhm.
They have more. I mean, they had more screen time than the parents did.
Yeah.
Um, and that to me is always very interesting when you do give so much screen time to the bad guys.
Mhm.
Uh, in whatever kind of movie it is. Because I just watched that movie Antlers.
I like that.
And they yeah, it was pretty good. And I just thought it was interesting how much they show of this creature. They show the development from the man
Uh-huh.
into this monster, and they showed so much, and I couldn't decide if I liked it or not. I was like I kind of like the idea of not knowing, but
Yeah.
it was I don't know, it also changes the perspective a little bit because like with the son Junior in Last
Mhm.
House on the Left, um, seeing so much of him did give you some sympathy for him to seeing the way that's his father, correct? I was always confused by like also like the age looks really odd, but
Well, yeah, I'm not
um,
sure about the relations between like him and the other three, but yeah, he's clearly like the younger one and
yeah, I swear they
obviously
said it
easily
was.
manipulative,
Oh, very yeah. He's and of
especially at
course
the
like
end.
he's hooked on meth. Yeah, I believe I swear they said it was his son on the radio.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and so I I want to check it because I was kind of confused just because like he doesn't they look very similar in age. But then again, like it would show like if your father
So
tells you to
yeah,
do these things, you're not going to say no.
they both have the
So
same last name. It's Krug
oh, perfect.
Stilo and Junior Steele,
Okay, so yeah, I guess they are father son.
which that's
Because
weird because they look maybe 5 years apart.
yeah, they look
They're
very
not
very similar in
brothers.
age.
They're
I guess
father and son.
yeah, that's what they said. I mean, at least that's what I remember in the on the radio part because I was making sure to listen to that radio uh cast that they were doing in the car because they were discussing them, which also reminds me of a scene in Gerald's game when
Mm.
they were driving the car and like a little blurb was on the radio and I was like, that's gonna come into play later. I know it, and of course it does. Uh,
This is
and
blowing my mind. I always thought they were brothers.
you know,
That
I,
their father and son. I'm like, totally, my mind
I,
is blown.
I, 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 that is what I remember. I remember them hearing it was his son, and I guess maybe that's why they would call him Junior. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that
I
makes
mean,
sense.
I
They
just
just
heard his
don't look,
name.
he doesn't look
They
young
don't
enough.
look it. No, they do not. And if I'm wrong about this, I apologize to the people listening because then I'm just throwing you off. But it, I did like seeing that dynamic of the father son. The father is so brutal to his son and is able to manipulate him, and it makes sense. Like, yeah, if my dad, told me to do these things, it would be hard not to say yes. And of course, in the end, when he tells his son to kill himself, I was like, oh my god! Like, I think that was just horrible, and just shows
Yeah.
how diabolical that character is.
So I just looked it up. It says Krug's addicted son, Junior. That's crazy to me. That
Yeah,
is just bizarre casting because they don't even look
no,
close to being able to be fathers. So
I think
maybe
if
Krug seems like the kind of guy who would have had a couple kids when he was like 13. So I guess maybe.
oh yeah, for sure. Honestly, yeah. Um, and
In that ending scene, he like manipulates his son to shoot himself in the head and die. That
I
is
know.
that is batshit crazy.
Yeah, and that's why I was just like, God, this guy's pure evil. I mean, who could convince her? Because well, what I can tell is if like Krug is on meth or does hardcore drugs like that, I think he just uses it to manipulate his son, and obviously he does a very good job at it because he convinces his son to kill himself, and it's just like, Oh,
And here's an article.
I was very drawn to them.
Here's an article from 2015. The sentence: in a final act of brutality, Krug, arguably a prime contender for worst father of the year, persuades his son to commit suicide. So, yeah, maybe I should have researched this more. It's based on their physical looks. It just doesn't.
Oh,
look maybe 5 years apart.
I think if they cut Junior's hair short, it would have worked a little more. I think him having long hair makes him like way older, and also they look so similar because of the long hair.
Yeah.
Unless maybe that's why they wanted it to be. But yeah, Junior looked way too old to be his son, which is why I was a little confused by it. But yeah, it makes sense.
This is why I do this podcast, so I can learn things.
Yeah, I mean,
now I know.
Yeah, and maybe, I mean, watch the movie again and see, the different. I'm sure it's me a different vibe now because.
Yeah, I always thought they were brothers. That's really interesting. Now I know.
Ooh, makes it worse.
Yeah, that brings a really sadistic quality to Krug at the end, and then now I'll really be rooting for him to be chopped up by that chainsaw.
Oh yeah.
But you mentioned the music. Speaking of Krug, you mentioned the music. Did you know that the music throughout the movie, including the songs and stuff, was all done by the actor who played Krug, David Hess?
Oh, really? I did not know that.
The supreme violent being, bad guy of the movie, he's the one who's making all the music, all that happy stuff.
All the happy stuff. Oh my god.
I really like that one, Now You're All Alone, that plays like near the end of the torture scenes, and that one has a great rhythm to it. I looked it up on IMDb, and apparently it's in The Hateful Eight by Quentin Tarantino.
Oh, okay.
Quentin Tarantino must be a fan of Last House because he used it for Hateful Eight.
I guess he is. And before I forget, because I always forget everything, I did love that most of the violence and stuff happens in the daytime as well.
Right.
I mean, and then also The Hills Have Eyes. Everything is broad daylight, and I love when movies do that. I think anything that happens in broad daylight that's horrifying that can still scare you that way is just like, this speaks to like how good of a job the director does.
Right.
Because I don't know, daytime horror is just it just makes it so real. And those two girls, I mean, they're so close to the parents' house, and it's in broad daylight, and those stupid cops are just,
let's talk about those guys
around. It's funny because you say, Wes Craven wanted to do comedy, and of course with his other movies, a great combination of dark humor and comedy, dark humor and horror.
Yeah.
And this movie just it was like buffoonery. Those cops were just morons.
Yeah.
And just like when they, like with the eggs, like the chickens and stuff, when they're sitting on and they fall off the truck, and then this like dopey music. I'm like, what is going on?
It's the worst part of the movie. Like the scenes with the cops is ridiculous. It adds nothing. We're even with the girls and the bad guys in the woods for a while, and then it like cuts back to the cops at one point, and I'm like, no. Like if I think it's because he treats them as buffoons, as you said. Like if he treated like one cop character seriously and he's like trying to figure out what's going on, like that could work. But it's just like the music like gets fast and bumbly again, and it's like with the cop and crazy shenanigans are happening, and it's like, what is this, like The Naked Gun? Like what? Like this does not fit at all with the extreme brutality that's happening at the same time. Like he wasn't. This is his first movie. He couldn't quite balance those yet. I mean, later in his career, he obviously in Scream just beautifully weaves comedy and drama with horror, and like he could figure it out in the 90s, but in 71 he wasn't quite there yet, and you can see that here. That's the part of the movie that does not work at all. I mean, it's maybe 10 minutes. It's not very much material, but it's just it that sinks the movie a little bit, is those scenes with the cops. It just does not work.
It really does, because I was just like, can I just fast forward through these parts? like what's going on? And
I like the chicken, the lady with the chickens.
Oh yeah, she was
with their teeth.
Like 10 out of 10 for her. Her teeth.
Oh she's fantastic.
But I believe in the remake, the cops are not involved in it. I believe so. If anything,
that's a good point. Yeah.
If anything, I would love if they killed the cops, just to eliminate. Because I feel like I was just like, if these cops come in and like save the day or some BS like that, I swear. So I'm happy they just came in the end. For some reason, it took them 12 hours to get to their house. I don't know how.
Mhm.
But I'm happy at least they didn't. I'm happy they didn't have like a shining moment because I didn't want them to. They didn't deserve it. I
Yeah.
want the parents to do what they want to do, kill these people, have some fun with it. And I was really happy the cops just I like either cops die or cops stay out of it. And I got
The
what I wanted.
the only thing I like is that we do get the cop coming in right at the end, right when the
Yeah.
dad is chainsawing Krug like no other. I love that. It's like right when he's sticking him with the chainsaw that the cop comes in. Like, he's like, don't do it, don't do it. That little piece is good. So I'm like, well, I like
Yeah.
that because then that sets up all these questions because the movie's over in like 30 seconds. It's like, oh, what's going to happen to the parents? How's that going to play out? And it kind of leaves you wondering. So I
hmm
like that the cop coming in at that moment. But I'm like, we could have set up that character in a much better way in the first hour and a half. I don't know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Or just made it more, even if it was just like they left and then the whole in between with them running out of gas, if all that was cut out, because you don't need those scenes at all. You just need, I guess maybe they need it for running time. Who knows?
Maybe they were short.
Yeah,
They were like, we
because
need
those
something.
scenes were just so out of place. And so like I feel like if they just went back to the house, or sorry, went back to the police station,
Yeah.
I don't know, talk some stuff up, and then they talk about like, oh, there's a car broke. Someone reported a car broken down or something, and they realize, and then they rush, and before they get there, of course, all
Mhm.
that happens. To me, that's a
Yeah.
much better flow. Uh, that would have been,
Right.
yeah, just made it a little more suspense because yeah, those scenes just killed the vibe.
So yeah, let's as we kind of move on here with the movie, let's kind of break it up into its three parts. So
Yeah.
let's kind of dig into the first third before we get to the terrorizing in the woods. Like everything up until that point, kind of what were your thoughts on like the first 20 to 30 minutes, like before we get to the woods? Like any thoughts you had on that section of the movie, the early part?
Well, first of all, it was very, very 70s, of course,
Yes.
open up with, her in the shower. And I was like, okay, well, there we go. We got
Yeah,
that.
I'm like,
Um,
there you go, Wes.
um, yeah, I mean, I think it had it had a pretty typical setup with, seeing the family and, meeting the parents. I mean, I think it was because I knew it was gonna happen. I was like, as soon as I saw the parents, I was like, you're all gonna lose your shit soon. Like it's
Yeah.
gonna happen. And so I was like really paying attention to them. And also the parents are very loving towards each other, which I really like.
Uh-huh.
Because I feel like that doesn't happen really in movies anymore. Like, I don't know. I feel like usually in horror movies, to add on to the suspense and the drama, they always have some tension between the
Mm.
parents. So seeing the parents so in love,
Mm-hmm.
and like when they're making the cake together and it's so
Yeah.
sweet, and he's like, "Oh, this is delicious," and they're so warm and sweet, and that doesn't happen in horror movies anymore. Like in all my favorite horror movies, like there's always some kind of tension
Mm.
between the parents. Um, and so I think having them have that great relationship, and then you know they don't even second guess like teaming up to take down these guys. They very yeah they felt like a team, which I really loved.
Mm-hmm.
They were both. It wasn't that the dad was more like, I'm gonna take care of this.
Yeah, you stay put.
You mourn. No,
Mm-hmm.
she went into the woods with a man and bit his penis off, and then she slit the throat. She took down two people,
Mm-hmm.
and he took down one. And it took a long time for it. It took him forever to take down that guy. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a big guy, but come on, he had a gun and a chainsaw. He
There's a
had an
lot of
advantage.
close-ups with that chainsaw.
Yeah.
Getting closer.
Um. So I think seeing the relationship was great. Um.
Yeah, I like those two together,
Yeah.
especially at the beginning. Like he clearly looks older than her, but there's a chemistry between them throughout the movie that
hmm
works really well. And those are the two
Yeah.
actors I think that had some credits. Like I think they were on soap operas and they had done work before. So those are not the two amateur actors in the movie,
Oh,
the
for sure.
parents. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. And yeah, I did, as much as like I said, like I didn't like seeing so much of like the villains. I think it did work in this way. I think more so. I think mostly because I did like seeing that relationship between Krug and his son. I just think, I don't know. I think seeing the difference between the relationship that she had with her father she loved, like, she gave him, a kiss on the cheek. She's very sweet. She's just also very fun with him. Like, I feel like the audience had a very good sense of humor. Like, when she wasn't wearing the bra, and they could see her nipples through her shirt, and she's like playing around, and the parents are like, "What are you doing? Like, that's ridiculous." And just that cute little moment of them just like playing around and having fun together. And then you cut to go see Junior and his dad, who are just, the dad is just pure evil, and has him hooked on meth. And the way he treats him is just awful. So just seeing the complete opposite of the two family dynamics, I think plays very well. Even though you're seeing a lot of these villains that is not typically my thing. It worked well for this because it's just, I mean, at the end, to me, it's almost like this about family. Almost like it's
loving family.
Like, I mean, the parents are willing, the mom that are willing to do all these horrible things to avenge their daughter, and Krug isn't even able to like do anything with his son. I mean, like we said, he tells him to kill himself. It's like complete opposite dynamics, which is, I'm just now realizing, talking about it, I'm like, oh, that's a huge, I was like, I'm having like an epiphany right now. That was a cool theme of the film for sure.
I think you talk about, do we see too much of the villain? I think it depends on the horror film. Like in Jaws, I think it's important that we don't see the shark for the first hour that much. I think in slasher films, the less we see of Michael Myers and things, the better.
Absolutely.
But I think this movie's different. It's like, I mean, these are characters that we get to see their behavior together as a group before the girls come in, so we get a little bit more understanding of them. And I think if the movie painted the four bad guys as just one-dimensional, like evil characters, and we only saw them in shadow, and then they attack the girls and drag them to the forest and attack them, I don't think the movie would be as good. I like that we set them up as people so that when they're doing these horrific things, like, it makes the terror more palpable to the audience. I don't know.
Absolutely. And then, we, with Junior being like almost like the more level-headed one, and like he knows that what's happening is really bad, and like I think seeing that build up also helped with the audience, like making it believable that it's not like he just changes his mind real fast. He's like, oh, this is bad. You've seen him before and after, the way he's treated, the way he's just a very soft-spoken guy, and he it does help build these characters that way more for sure.
I like that we got a long scene at the beginning between parents and daughter. Like, we get to see their behavior together. They're very loving towards each other, even though I didn't like the frame of that shot where the mom is like halfway out of the frame. I'm like,
for sure,
what are you doing? but I like that. I think the movie is lesser if we don't at least get one scene at the beginning of the three, like, kind of bantering together. We need that at the beginning so that we understand the loss. So I thought that was good. What do you think of that? It opens with based on a true story. I'm like, that's very like that. I'm like, this isn't based on a true story.
It's it's based on any story, really. I feel like I mean, anyone could have, that could have happened to anyone in the woods. I don't know. I feel like, and a lot of movies do that. I mean, and they're like The Fourth Kind, that horrible alien movie. It was like based on a true story. We showed the actual footage, and we're like, as a kid, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And halfway through, I was like, you know what? I was like, this is not real. Like, these aren't real clips. This isn't really happening. So now I just never trust the based on true story thing ever again.
I think for most audiences, though, when they see that and then they see this horrific circumstance playing out, it's like, oh my gosh, like, knowing or thinking that it happened makes it scarier. I think that's the thinking of the filmmakers. Like, they're like, oh, if we put it in their heads that this happened, even if they're lying, I was curious about the nudity in the shower at the beginning, because I'm like, I don't like, was this in the contract? Did they have to deliver breasts? Like, was Wes Craven? Wes Craven doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would have put that in just because. It seems like the way it's shot and the way how it just starts the movie feels to me that he was contracted to have nudity for the investors. I was trying to find, like, if that was the case. I couldn't find anything, but it seems to me that Craven himself wouldn't have just done that for no reason. So I don't know.
Yeah, I agree, because it did throw me off when I first saw it. I was like, oh great, typical. But then like it's Wes Craven, so I was like, why would he would he make it intentional? And I mean, her breasts are mentioned a few times in the movie. Well, we
Yeah.
see it first of all, and then the second time he's talking about how they can see her breasts through her shirt, and then she later talks to Phyllis about how her breasts finally came in. So they talk about her breasts a lot.
Yeah, maybe it
So maybe,
parallels
yeah,
what
maybe
happens
they're
in the
like,
woods.
yeah, I
Because
think
they do get
yeah,
naked in the woods. Maybe he's paralleling like the innocence of her alone in a shower at the beginning to what she has to go through in the woods. Maybe that was the intention.
yeah, I think yeah, because that makes sense. I mean, because I mean, it she wasn't very sexualized when she
No.
was nude. It was just she was just nude, and it
Yeah.
wasn't. And I mean, I know like in so many other movies, she didn't have a boob job. Like they weren't ginormous and they weren't up in your face. It was always like a side profile. So it was never. So yeah, I think there's more so she came into her womanhood. Like she just became, and she turned 17, right? I think in the movie, or she turned 18.
Yeah, something around there. But what I
Something
think,
around that.
yeah, you hit on a good point there. I think what makes one of the best aspects of the movie is that the nudity we get in the forest is not overly sexualized. That would have been wrong. It's
Oh
really
yeah,
just there's nothing sexual to that. It's just pure terror and awfulness. And that's, I think, part of the reason why people were going completely crazy in 72 when they saw the movie. Because most of the time you see nudity in a movie and it's done to kind of like titillate the audience and blah, blah, blah. And that's not the
yeah.
case. That's not what Craven's doing here. And I think that's
No,
part
yeah,
of the
it's
reason why the movie is kind of on its own separate level. Nobody was doing that in
yeah,
72.
that's absolutely, because yeah, those like you can never see that scene and be like, oh, this is oh look at their boobs. Oh my god, like
No.
you're way too
Mm.
distracted by what's happening to them
Yeah.
and the brutality against their body. That yeah, it's yeah. I mean, I I I think Wes did a great job of handling that and not making a
Yeah.
stereotypical boob job or
Um,
a boob job like a boob scene like he
Boobs,
did.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, watching it, like on set, that must have been a really difficult scene to shoot too. Like, does
Oh
not
yeah.
seem like I don't think Wes Craven was having, his greatest day on set as a director that day. It must have been really awkward for him and the actors
Hmm.
and putting themselves in that vulnerable position, especially if one of the girls was feeling uncomfortable with the other actors. It's not, it's not a great situation.
Yeah, and it reminded me of the scene. I believe it's The Punisher, the original. I think that's the movie where where his wife is killed and his daughter is raped. Is that the correct movie? I
Is
believe.
that there's the Punisher, there's that Death Wish movie with Bruce Willis, you might be thinking of?
Death Wish. Sorry,
Death
it's the
Wish.
original Death Wish.
The
Um,
original one with Charles Bronson in the 70s.
yes, yes, I had to watch that for a film history class, and I
Okay.
remember Jeff Goldblum's in it because Jeff Goldblum
Oh,
was the man who rapes and
oh wow.
kills the mom,
I
and
have
then
not seen Death Wish, the original.
oh yeah, it's I
I'm
saw
getting
it.
to it. I think it's 74. So I'm getting to it
Okay, oh yeah, well,
on the
almost there. Yeah,
podcast.
Jeff Goldblum is in, and he's a no-name actor, so it was really funny seeing him. So when he rapes the daughter, it's extremely brutal, just like in this movie. But there's a part where like he takes off her shirt and he starts sucking on her breast, and they show all of it. And I remember watching that in my dorm room, and I was just like, oh my god! I was like,
Never
I
look
can't
at
believe they're showing.
Goldblum.
Oh,
Never
I
gonna look
never
at
from
Goldblum the
again.
same way.
And oh yeah, never again. Also, that's the only scene because the dad then like tries to seek him out. He never finds him. Jeff Goldblum's in that one scene, then he's gone and
Oh
he
wow.
doesn't come back. Um, but it was so brutal and awful, and I felt so uncomfortable watching it because it felt like
Yeah.
such a real, sexual assault scene.
Yeah.
And it was horrifying. And it's funny because like these movies are 2 years apart, and I was like, now I'm wondering, oh, did Death Wish get the same attack on this? Because I mean, both rape scenes are very similar.
Yeah,
And
I'd
if
have to
anything,
research Death Wish.
yeah, and if anything, I mean, the one of Death Wish freaked me, like stuck with me even more, just because they do show him his mouth on her breast and doing all these horrible things, and Ooh, it's awful.
Imagine if Jeff Goldblum had played Krug.
Oh, he would have been a fantastic one. Oh my god,
would be kind of weird though today. I
it
mean,
would,
he's
oh, it
still
would
a
have been
very
awful.
popular actor in
Oh yeah, I mean,
Marvel movies and
Jurassic World.
Jurassic World.
I just saw that movie. Yeah.
You could have been in the be like, hey, has anyone seen Last House?
House on the Left or Death Wish. I was like,
Death Wish.
You won't like him.
You're telling the projectionist like, put on that clip from Death Wish after Jurassic World Dominion ends.
Oh yeah.
Something I wanted to mention real quick that I thought was interesting, that when we first meet Sadie, the evil, the woman in the movie, she's singing in the Rain. I think it's off screen. Singing in the Rain, which is used to horrific effect just a few months before in A Clockwork Orange by Stanley Kubrick. There's that really famous kind of rape scene towards the beginning where they're singing in the Rain, using this like classic lovable song from the 50s, classic musical, using it in a scene of horror. We also get Sadie singing it at the beginning, but Clockwork Orange came out in December of 71 and they shot Last House in earlier in 71. So it's not a case where I think Craven saw Clockwork and then said, oh, I'm going to tip that off in my movie. I think it was just a coincidence, but I thought that was weird.
Interesting. Yeah. That'd be interesting to find out if those were related in any way. Because I mean, based on his later work, he likes to incorporate, pop culture into his movies, and that could definitely be,
I like the ice cream parlor scene. I like the little bits of behavior of the two girls together as friends before the terror. I thought that was necessary. If it had just been the girls like leaving the house and then they're, attacked and dragged to the woods, I don't think it would be as good. Like, I like that we get like light music and the camera's kind of like bouncing around and they're looking and they're like, what flavor do we want? And it's like, terror is coming in the next few minutes, but it's nice to set up that they have this innocence and this great rapport between them as friends, and that pays off when they're in the woods and they're naked and she's like, it's gonna be okay, just don't think about it. And like, I think like paralleling like that scene to the ice cream parlor scene was effective.
It's funny because that scene also resonated with me as well because of the quickness of how Phyllis was able to choose her ice cream right away. She's like, I want mint chocolate chip and that's all. And then with Mary, she was like deciding what she wanted. She had to try one. Like she took her time, like figuring out, almost like, I think it's showing like Phyllis is more of a mature woman. And like she knows what she wants. She came in, got that ice cream, and she was done. And then Mary's kind of like, she's like doing that on the counter. And like, even though she is 17 and like she thinks she's a woman, she was so childlike in that scene. And that's made it even a little more brutal, because I mean, as adult as she thinks she might be, in that little 1 minute scene, we got to see that no, like she's still a kid who can't choose her ice cream yet. And it definitely threw in a lot of innocence. And then of course in the woods, Phyllis really took control of the situation, while Mary was of course very very traumatized and confused and scared. And so I think and what I love is that Phyllis was, I really loved Phyllis. I love her very much. I just because I think she was she's so brave.
Played by Lucy Grantham, we should say. Lucy Grantham.
Lucy Grantham. And she does it also. Lucy Grantham felt like a very experienced actress as well. And I don't know, it's just like she was so protective of Mary, and I really love that. And it made her very, very brutal death scene as well. Just more heartbreaking, because I mean, they could have made her, just a floozy and just kind of like, just kind of a dumb character or a crazy character who gets into all this trouble and make her this, almost not like she deserves it, because that's what her character personality is. Like, oh, she deserves to die. That's just typically how horror movies go. So I was happy that like the cooler character was still very much protective and sweet. And
she's really the one who says, I I'm going to make a run for it. When they
Mm-hmm.
come after me, you go get help.
Yeah.
Because it is frustrating in those early scenes in the woods, which let's talk about the second act of the movie in the woods. Like why are they not trying to run?
Yeah.
For a while, you're like, okay. I mean, you get the sense that they have weapons and that if they make the wrong call there, that something bad could happen. But so it's a relief to the audience when she's like, okay, I'm going to make a run for it. They're going to chase after me. When they leave, then you get out. And so she's almost in a way like almost sacrificing her own safety for her friend.
She is, yeah.
Which is really great. Like that she would do that. And then again, I don't think she's running fast enough.
No, she wasn't. Like her one flaw,
like,
she did not run fast enough, unfortunately.
I mean, they've been through trauma, so I think about that. But I also you have to have the sense in that situation that your life is in danger, and so you need to book it.
Yeah.
If you're gonna make a run for it.
She needed to book it.
But she's like taunting the guy across the river, and I'm like, what are you doing? Get out of there.
Yeah. I would have
like,
jumped in that river and just gone downstream and just like, I think that with these movies, it's always like, one thing about horror movies is that it's always, you think about what you would do in those situations. Because like I instantly put myself, I was like, okay, if this was me, I would 100% take off and go into the river and go downstream and see where I end up. And it is, I was like, it's annoying that I was like, why aren't they thinking what I'm thinking? Like, come on, get in the water. And I think in
just float down.
And in the remake with the daughter, I think that's what she does. I think she goes into the water to escape them.
And they think she's dead?
And I think she's dead. And I think, and then, I mean, it's been so long since I saw that movie. I got it at a Redbox. I remember doing that. Maybe that was why I was thinking that in my head. I'm sure there was some little memory in the back of my head saying that's what you should do because that's what she did in the movie. But yeah.
I think the best thing in the movie, if there's one great thing about the movie that we still that makes the movie still relevant today, especially in the horror genre, it's the documentary like feel to those 20 plus minutes in the forest. And just like it feels like it's very voyeuristic to be watching these horrific things play out. We've gotten to know these girls as these young innocent girls, and they're put through the ringer by these horrific people, and the fact that she almost gets away and then is just brutalized in pretty graphic detail in the movie. We don't really see a lot of graphic violence in films in 72, at least like theatrical movies that most people would see. And then for both girls to not get away, very unusual. Like in most narratives, one of the girls would get away and try to get help, and that doesn't happen here. And I mean, watching the second of the two just kind of like will herself into the lake and prepare to die. It's horrifying, and that's the section of the movie that just still holds up today and makes this an important part of the genre in its history.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that even just adds on to like thinking of how people reacted back then, because I'm sure everyone was just like, oh well, the good girl is gonna live because she has to, and she doesn't.
It's like Psycho.
And exactly, and it's just like, oh my god. And I think that's just so, I can't like imagine it watching it then. It's like that makes it just so more real, because in a real situation, in real life, they probably both would have died. Like those people would have been probably very determined, and they would have killed them both. And that's just how it would have been. So it just adds on the element of based on a true story.
Yeah. And I just like that there's not a whole lot of style to the scenes. Like I feel like if Craven had made Last House in the 80s, when the friend is running away and not running so fast, when Phyllis like there'd be like music, there'd be like bump, 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 there'd be like some terror music going on there, like we get like Friday the 13th or something. But like there's very little music. I think this is like one or two stings of the, like when the machete comes up or something, it's like sting, like we get that. But like the two girls getting brutally attacked, there's no music, there's not really any cinematic style with the camera. It's just kind of like close up camera, slightly handheld, showing us what's happening. I think the lack of style makes the movie more powerful. If he
Yeah.
was trying to do all sorts of cool camera tricks and dolly shots and stuff, like it would feel more like a movie and we could kind of separate ourselves. But it looks like he's just documenting this series of events as if it's really playing out for real. And that's what makes the middle of the movie so scary.
Absolutely. And I didn't even think about that with the music. I mean, that makes total sense. I mean, yeah, because sometimes music can take away from the scene for sure. I mean, anytime they played that, 70s goofy music, I was just like, I mean, it took me out of the whole thing. So, yeah. I mean, unless that was possibly his style of like, maybe that's why he had no music in that, is to, or just showing the contrast. Maybe he was trying to, he created that contrast very well because those scenes were very intimate, and if like you were seeing something you shouldn't be seeing, and it's never quite. I guess that's probably why it probably has an effect. I didn't think of it until now you said it, but yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, intimate's a good word, and because of the film stock itself, it's very grainy. It has that feeling of we're watching this really happen. So having like a really robust horror musical score behind everything would not have felt right. Not to say that I don't like horror movie scores. I think Halloween, my favorite horror movie of all time from 78, doesn't work without that score. That score makes that movie what it is. Same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, it's one of the creepiest horror movie scores. It depends on the kind of horror film you're making. I think Last House, it would have been a lesser movie if he had been pumping up the scary music all the way through. Wouldn't have worked.
And you're hearing the sounds of the forest, which is what those girls heard. Like they didn't hear music. So it's definitely it puts the audience much more in their shoes again. Just all you would hear are the rustling of like the grass and him like slapping and all that stuff. Like it's chilling.
And so every sound we do hear is all the more effective.
Yeah,
like just the sound of the gunshot when he finally shoots Mary, and everything goes dead quiet as she kind of like slumps over like into the water, is way more horrifying than if there had been loud music for the last 2 minutes.
For sure.
That makes like the gunshot and the machete sting and those scenes. And that always gets me every time I watch the movie when the machete comes up and it's like sting. And I'm like, whoa.
A big ass machete.
Yeah. And God, just some of those. I think the most effective shot of violence is when they're stabbing Mary in up here, like the top of the chest, and blood is coming out, and she's screaming like you rarely hear an actor scream in the movie. It feels so real.
Yeah,
like you're watching this happen, that she's really getting stabbed in that shot. Like that, for me, that's the shot of the movie. Like that's the scariest shot of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Feels real.
Mary or Phyllis?
It's after Phyllis has died.
After Phyllis,
because Phyllis gets stabbed in the back. Phyllis gets stabbed in the back, and she does that thing. She's like, oh, and he falls down.
That's true.
No, when Mary's, remember, she's like holding Junior's hand, and she's like, oh, we're getting away, and then they bump into Krug, and then they get her down on the ground, and then she they're stabbing her, and blood is running all down her chest, and her mouth is wide open. And it's not so much a scream, it's like a cry. It's like a crying scream. Just like ah ha ha. Like the way she cries, her mouth wide open in just sheer terror, as what looks like pretty realistic blood running down her chest. That to me is the shot of the whole movie.
Oh yeah.
Like the best shot. But it's also moving when she's shot in the water too. And in some ways, it's like nothing in the first third and the last third can live up to that middle part.
Absolutely,
there are some moments that I really like in the last 20, 30 minutes with the parents and things. But it always, to me, watching it again last night, it feels kind of like an afterthought. It's interesting.
Absolutely.
Narratively, it's the most interesting part. This idea that they take shelter at the house of the parents of the girl they killed, and the parents find out and they're going to become the killers. That's the most interesting part of the movie narratively. But I think the last 20 minutes of 1972 Last House doesn't quite live up to the impact of what we get in the middle part in the forest.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it's solid, but it's not quite like that in terms of the cutting and some of the acting. It's not quite at the level.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like, yeah, I think, those last 20 minutes are typical of a 70s horror movie.
Yeah.
The chainsaws and the guns and the horrible things. But yeah, just that, yeah, those are more like cinematic horrors versus rape and the horrible murdering is much more, that realism that people aren't used to seeing.
I always think, and I always think when I watch the 72 movie, like the reveal that it's the parents' house that they're staying inside isn't very strong. Like I feel like that moment where the audience goes, oh, they're staying at Mary's parents' house. We don't really get that. It's kind of just like pushed aside and it's like cuts to the parents and they're like, oh, we have people who need to stay here tonight. And there's no impact to that moment, which I can't remember. I'm assuming there is in the remake. There's probably more to that. Like where the audience goes, oh, it's the parents' house. But like we don't really get that in the original.
I think what would have been really great is that if they hadn't shown that the car broke down next to their house, they hadn't shown that, where they showed the mailbox with like Mary's name on it. And they had not shown that, and then they just go to the next scene and you see them walk up and they're walking and then like the camera like holds still and you just see they walk by the mailbox and they go up. That would have been much more like, oh my God, they're going up to the house. And I like the coincidence, because the fact that you already know that they're near it, it's kind of like, okay, well, we can kind of I feel like you can kind of assume that's where they're going to go because they're already next door to it. And so, I think definitely cutting the scene where you see the cars stop in front of the house would have been much more impactful for sure.
I just think that's probably the most interesting part of this narrative, and that Craven, he kind of lets us down in that small respect. Like that should have had more impact, I think. But we get, but it is very interesting when we get to the house and they're having dinner, right, with the parents and they're talking and Krug's all dressed up with his hair done. It's like, it is very just odd. Everything we've watched in the woods and then seeing this, it's like, whoa, this is very weird.
Oh,
like, they picked the wrong house to stay here. This is not going to end well. And I mean, kind of going into the last 20 minutes of the movie, like what were your thoughts on kind of how it wraps up and the violence, and like what were your thoughts on the final 20 minutes or so with the parents attacking the killers?
Well, I really wish we had more of it. I wish I think it should have been stretched out a little more. And because I was basing this kind of comparing that one with the remake, and in the remake I remember like half the movies when they're at their house. And it was very much drawn out. I also believe they were staying at a guest house behind them instead of the actual house. Yeah, I remember that. So they had more time, and also with the daughter still being alive in that version, there's more time with them taking care of her and also planning. So I like the buildup. I absolutely love everything with the mom taking the guy to the woods and seducing him and biting his penis off. I was rooting for it so hardcore. I loved it, every minute of it, because I was like, you are badass. And also she's not being a throwaway mom character. She's taking matters in her own hands. She was like, I mean, she risked her life more than the father I feel like, with going into the woods in the middle of the night with a man.
And she's so casual about it. She's like, she's like, yes, let's get out of here.
Like, my husband could never touch me this way. And he's like, oh, I'll do it. Like, oh, apply your hands. Love it. And then also her fight with, the woman by the pool. Love Sadie. That too. I was like, get Sadie, like take her down. Yeah. Because I mean, Sadie is pretty tough for sure. And I liked seeing them fight, because then, of course, and then with the mom slitting her throat and then she falls in the pool just like her daughter, I was just like, love it. Like you killed her just the way they killed your daughter, and
that That's the part where the cross-cutting works the best in the whole movie. We're
Yes.
cross-cutting from the dad sticking Krug with the chainsaw to Sadie getting her throat slashed and falling into the pool, and that the cross-cutting between the two events happening at the same time, that works really well. I like the editing.
It does, yes. Very, very, yeah, very good point, because it really does. Because the thing is, I think the pacing of the dad's story with it was very slow. Like, he was in the basement forever, and then
With
he
this
had
shotgun.
the gun, and then he got the chainsaw scenes took forever. I was like, please hurry up. Versus the mom, who's just like, she's getting
Get her
that
done.
stuff done, and then she goes on, to take down the girl, and I was just like, yeah. And I would have loved to have seen a fight between Junior and his dad. I was waiting for that, because I wanted Junior to maybe get a little bit more of a redemption. Because I mean, he did, turn the gun on his dad, but he didn't really try too hard to take his dad down. Which, I know it's his dad. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna redeem a character even a little bit, you gotta I don't know, at least maybe shoot his dad, or like maybe I thought like what was gonna happen is that Krug was gonna get like almost have to kill the dad, and Junior was gonna step in and like almost sacrifice himself, which is typical. So maybe it is an interesting idea that Wes was like, no, the dad has more power. He's gonna make him kill himself. That's a huge twist for sure.
That
so
feels right for 72. I think later on, and if you remember, I can't remember in the remake, what makes more sense is the dad sticking Krug with the chainsaw, and he maybe walks away thinking he's killed Krug, but he's not quite dead, and Krug like reaches for a weapon or something, and then Junior kills his dad right before he can kill this man, and like Junior saves the day right at the last second, and Junior gets his redemption, and he's the one of the four that gets to live at the end.
Yeah,
it would make more sense than
it would make.
I'm going to kill you, Dad. No, you shoot yourself. Do it. And okay.
Anyway, you know what?
30 seconds.
I'm trying to think which one. Like, I don't
know. There is some power to the dad just having such control over his minion, including his own kid, that he's like, you're not going to kill me. You're going to kill yourself. You wuss. You wuss, just screams at him. That scene has great power when we just stay on the same shot and you see them come into frame and he's just screaming at Junior, and Junior off camera shoots himself. Like, that scene has great power. But I also like the idea that Junior is the one of the four who seems like he can become good and redeem himself. And like, he's kind of trying to save Mary at one point. He's like running with her out of the forest. So but Wes Craven, he's not always kind to his villains.
No, he's not.
So
I don't know. I think even though it's like a middle ground where maybe Junior does like protect the father in some way, and then the dad, and then his dad Krug just like brutally kills him and was just like, I hate you, the worst son ever, something like that, to where like you do get, okay, he redeems stuff a little bit, and then but his dad is also so horrible and like completely destroys his son. I think we could have gone the best of both worlds in that sense. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know which one I liked more. I don't know which way I would have liked it, because that scene with him convincing his son to kill himself is just absolutely insane.
You don't expect it at all.
You don't expect it. I don't know. I guess I did. I just felt for Junior a little bit, and I wanted him to have something.
Yeah. But that scene works well. We have to mention, before we kind of finish our thoughts on the movie, we have to mention what I think is the most cinematic scene of the whole movie, and that's the nightmare scene with the drill. With the tool like pushing up against the guy's teeth, and the under shots of the parents with their scrubs on. They're like, no, stay still, stay very, very still. It's important. and they're about to just chop his teeth out.
You know what though? Was when that came on, I didn't know it was a dream, because it's because so much of the film was so like jumped cut, literal, and like edited that way. And I was just like, I was like, wow, they just went right into it. They're not going to have a chase down or anything. They're just going to go right into killing these people. And then of course, and then you
And
know,
Weasel's having a dream.
it was a great foreshadowing for sure.
But
Of what's going to happen.
but it made me think about point of view. Point of view is so important in books and in films, and it's like, okay, so we're getting a point of view nightmare from Weasel, one of the four bad guys. It's like, who is this? Whose point of view are we seeing this movie through? There's really no answer to that. It's
That
kind
is
of
true.
like
Yeah.
we think it's Mary. She's our protagonist. That's how the movie starts, with her in the shower, and it's kind of her journey. And then it's kind of the parents at the end. But then we also get a nightmare from one of the villains. So it's like, I don't know whose point of view this movie is from. Wes Craven.
True. That's interesting that you say that. Yeah, because that's not. Well, I feel like he also he kind of did that with Nightmare on Elm Street a little bit too, with
Yeah, it's not always
those
Nancy.
characters. Yeah,
Nancy's our protagonist, but we do get some early scenes with her friend Tina, and sometimes it almost seems like it's point of view of Freddy at times, but
yeah,
usually, yeah, like later on, it's like this is mostly Nancy, this is mostly Sydney, but in Last House, I don't think Wes Craven was thinking about point of view at all. And it's just kind of like, we'll do a nightmare with Weasel. It's like, okay.
Well, it's kind of like very, I guess, very Psycho with Janet Leigh. Like,
yeah,
it goes from her, she dead, and then they go on. Okay, let's go with her sister now because that's the next character we have like in line. So it's her perspective now. So that it's that.
So I had to mention
did
that
give me
scene.
that Psycho sense. Yeah,
but like you can tell, like in that one scene, it's a little bit more cinematic. He's like the framing is a little bit like slicker, and the lighting and the costumes and like the close up on his teeth, like it just feels a little bit more professional than anything else in the movie, which is kind of
weird. For sure. And out the scene when they're eating dinner,
oh yeah,
that was interesting to look, because it felt like I felt like that scene in the dream looked very similar, because everything's just like dark around them, and then it's just like the light on the dinner table, and that almost felt like, I mean, unless maybe my screen was really bad, but when I saw that, I was like, it looked like this is like on a stage, or like
it does look like a stage
right now. And it was odd. And at that point, I was like, is this a real scene? I don't even know. And that definitely stood out to me. And now comparing those two, the lighting was so different between the dinner and then the that nightmare scene.
Yeah,
definitely made it. Yeah, very, very cinematic. You're right. For sure.
And so, yeah, I love the violence at the end. I do think the chainsaw scene goes on a little long. Like there's like 15 close-ups of the dad like coming towards the camera. I'm like, okay, let's
and like
get on
going
with
this. going through something. We're like, we get it. Chainsaws go through wood. We've seen it.
Like I wanted,
we got it.
Yeah, it's probably in more of the remake, but I wanted more like physical, like man on man. Like I wanted, like we get a little bit, but like the dad like tries to attack Krug, but then Krug like hits him on the back and knocks him down. He say something negative about the dad, like, oh, you're a wuss, you can't handle me. Well, and then he comes up with the chainsaw, and it's like, oh, but I would have loved at one point the dad is just full on just fist to face to Krug and is just tearing him up with his hand.
Me too.
Just, because when he's just holding the chainsaw, it's like there's not a lot of emotion behind it. He's just kind of like glaring at the camera with the chainsaw. And I'm like, doesn't have the emotion I'm looking for here.
Or like even with the chainsaw, like a few times, they look like some repetitive movement just to like let out that rage. I was like, and also they're fighting around the dead daughter as well for a lot of that scene with her on the couch. And I was like, if I was in that situation, I was like, I'd just be going crazy. And like, and he kind of pulled a Phyllis. He kind of like, I'm tired now. I can't do it.
Yeah.
And it's like where was like, I don't know. I feel like in the remake the dad was much more like kicking ass and kind of.
I think it's Tony Goldwyn.
Yes. Yeah, from Ghosts and everything. Yeah.
Monica Potter, I think, is the mom. Like two very good actors. So
I
mean, watching it last night, I kind of want to see the remake again. It's been a while.
It's been so long. I've only seen that one time, and I remember the daughter is played by I forget her name. I think Sarah something. She was in several like Disney Channel things, and
and then did Last House,
Aquamarine, and then she did that. So I think for me as well, I think seeing that actress have that happen to her when I experienced her with like Disney Channel and Nickelodeon and stuff, that was hard to watch because Yeah, you know, she was Aquamarine and she was Marnie in Halloween Town for that horrible movie, that really bad fourth movie. When they changed the actress, they brought her in, and then I was like, well, that's
Then Last
stupid.
House.
But then she's in Last House on Left, and it's like, ooh, like this is kind of, it's brutal to see like an actress that you recognize go through that,
Yeah.
especially when they're always an innocent actress.
And then at the very end, I love that the last shot we get is of the parents kind of holding each other, and it does a freeze frame.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going to happen next. You know they're going to get in trouble. You can't just like, I mean, I guess they could say self-defense, but I don't know. It's like they really go above and beyond like the self-defense thing.
They really
but
do.
But I like that we end with the parents holding each other, freeze frame, and then it's completely ruined with the bouncy happy music playing over
Yeah.
the end credits of showing the actors again. What the hell's going on there?
It's funny you say that, because I'm watching like, man, that was intense. And then that happened. I was like, God damn it. I was like, no more. I was like, stop. Like, Wes, I'm sorry.
What is going on there?
I was like, are the cops back? Like, what happened? Like, are they back on the chicken truck? Yeah, because as soon as the music started playing again, I was like, and we're done. I was like, nope.
Like, I guess it's there to let the audience like give them a little levity as they're getting up from their seats, walking down the aisle. Yeah. But this is such a horrific, traumatic story. You don't end with this bouncy, happy music over the end credits. That doesn't feel right.
For sure. Yeah, it was very much out of place.
So, you know, I fondness for this movie. It's very much the work of a, you know, kind of an amateur young director, hasn't quite found his footing yet. A lot of the themes he's playing with, he'll pursue in much better, more effective ways in his later films, where he's kind of figuring out kind of his directorial stamp and you know, developing his abilities as a director. You can tell he's just like hungry to make a movie here. Doesn't have a lot of resources. $90,000 even in 1971 isn't a lot of money, so he can only do so much. And you know, working with amateur actors and shooting a lot of outdoor stuff, and just like trying to like, I can see he probably wanted to make something a little bit better, but he's just doesn't have a lot of resources, doing his best. And as just a huge lifelong fan of Wes Craven, I just think it's fascinating to see this first film of his and just to kind of see how he got started. And the fact that so much in the movie is still powerful today says a lot. I've looked at a lot of films from 1972 that are just so mediocre you can't stand it. There's just nothing there.
God,
you know, I'm like, there's been a couple episodes recently, before I start recording, I'm like, to the guests, I'm like, I don't have a lot to say about this. Just to give you a heads up, you're gonna have to help me here. And there's a lot to talk about with Last House. You know, I mean, I think we explored all the major elements of the movie. Is there anything else about the movie? I have a little bit more trivia to share. Anything else about the movie we didn't touch on? Anything else about Craven as a director with this one that we haven't touched on? I should mention real quick, the actors, you know, we haven't mentioned all their names. The parents were Richard Towers and Cynthia Carr. I really like them in this. I like their presence and how we get to kind of spend time with them at the beginning. You mentioned that scene where they're baking. You know, we're just getting to know them as like a loving couple, and then to see how that plays out in the last third, I think is really effective. And then David Hess is Krug, his most famous role in the documentary I watched last night. They thought that David Hess was going to become a big movie star. You know, he has a lot of charisma, and I could kind of see that watching this. He's very, you know, he's kind of darkly handsome. You know, there's a scene early on where he's got his shirt off, and I'm like, okay, this is all right. and that the fact that he didn't really have much of a film career after this, I think he probably, of most of the actors, went on to do the most, maybe, but not a whole lot. And then Jeremy Rain was really great as Sadie, Mark Scheffler as Junior, and then Fred J. Lincoln as Weasel. That actor disowns this movie. In the 2003 documentary, he is ashamed to have been in it. And he talks negatively about his experience making it, and how he really, he said it's the one regret he has in his life that he made this movie.
I would love for you to send this to me. I would love to watch this. Is it on YouTube?
It's on YouTube. It's called it's called like, what's it called? Celluloid Crime of the Century. It's a 40-minute documentary. And at the end, I mean, I've watched 1,000 documentaries about movies. I've never seen this where at the end of his interview, he's like, yeah, it's my one regret. I wish I hadn't done it. I hate that I did it. And then it cuts to David Hess, who played Krug, and he's like bad mouthing Fred. Like, what the hell is he talking about? Made a movie with Wes Craven, blah 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 blah. And then he says that Fred went on to be a porno filmmaker. And so David Hess points out, he's like, why is he bad mouthing Last House? This is the guy who went on to make porno film. Like, oh, you regret being in this dirty early Wes Craven film, but you're totally fine shooting, graphic real life sex scenes. Like, what's that about? So it's almost like a back and forth for like a minute in the documentary. I'm like, this is something I've never seen in a behind the scenes documentary. Ooh. If Fred felt that way, why did he agree to be in the documentary?
Exactly.
That's what's so bizarre to me. Why would you they would call and you'd say no. Better to say nothing, better to say nothing than to badmouth it. That was very strange.
Very odd.
Because he shares a lot of anecdotes. Like, he's in the whole documentary talking about the movie and the making of it and Craven. And then at the end, he's just very negative about the experience. And I'm just like, wow, that's interesting. I don't think he had any shits left to give. He's like, oh, this is the last time I'm going to talk about this movie and this experience. I'm just going to say what I really feel.
Yeah, I guess so.
So yeah, but yeah, I mean, thinking of all of them as amateur actors, most of them as amateur actors, I think they do the job well.
Yeah.
I think their lack of experience adds a little bit to the movie. I think if they were overly experienced, every actor is for 71, 72. I don't know if the movie would be as powerful. I kind of like the fact that they're kind of learning as they're going along. It feels more real in a way. I don't know.
For sure. Absolutely.
And and Craven, as I said, it's not his strongest work by any means. I would pick many other films of his over this one. But he also has a lot of clunkers, Andrew, that we don't talk about, that I would definitely put beneath Last House on the Left.
My Soul, I think, was My Soul to Take his last film?
My Soul to Take was deadly dull. I only saw it the one time.
Yeah,
I rented it very excited because he wrote and directed that movie.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this, and the first scene's great. I remember the opening kill scene or violent scene was good. And then I was just like an hour in, I'm like, what is going on with this movie?
Yeah. It was nothing. Very messy.
It is watching a blank screen.
Yeah, it was. I remember watching that and I was like, because I think Scream 4 had also just come out not that long before. And then I was like, oh yes, I'm gonna watch this. And then I was turned off.
I'm so thankful My Soul to Take is not the last Craven film that we got. Scream 4 6 months later.
After. Okay, Scream 4 is after.
My Soul to Take was October of 2010, and then Scream 4 was April 2011.
Okay.
And then he quietly retired after that. I don't know between 2011 and his death in 2015 if he was developing any projects. I don't know. I don't think he had cancer in 2011. I think that came later, but I know Neve Campbell shared a story where like she took a final walk with him like a few months before he died, and she knew that this was the last time she was going to see him. So it wasn't out in the press. Like I remember it was a shock to me the day I read that he had died. I was not aware that he was sick. So I think most people didn't know, but I think people who knew him and had worked with him, like maybe some of them like Campbell did.
Yeah.
But I'm always thankful that his last film was not My Soul to Take, because this might be my least favorite of everything.
Yeah, it's not good. And Scream 4 is a great movie. So that's a good one to end on.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he made Vampire in Brooklyn, and which is not a good movie. And what are some other ones? He made a couple in the 80s. I kind of like Deadly Blessing and Swamp Thing. They're kind of fun, but
I know he did People Under the Stairs, correct?
People Under the Stairs was good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Deadly Friend is not great. That's from 86. There's like probably between 3 and 5 movies that I would definitely put under Last House. Last House is kind of in the middle for me of his filmography.
Yeah.
It's an important film because it's how he got to start. If he had never made Last House, maybe he wouldn't have made a movie. I mean, who knows what would have happened?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I'm always thankful, like sometimes, even if the first or second films aren't great, just to know like, okay, this is what got them their start. And then they went on to make just glorious films that I couldn't imagine my life without. So
Yeah, absolutely.
but yeah, it's been a lot of fun to talk to you about this one today. To wrap up here on Last House, I just wanted to share a couple more pieces of trivia. The initial title of the movie, actually, they had another title on set. It was in the documentary. It was like Night of Terror or something, Night of something. And then they wanted to release it as Sex Crime of the Century. And I guess they did. I guess they released that in as the title in test screenings, and it was not working. So then they turned to Krug and Company. That title, nobody showed up. And it
also
was
with the Krugs later on,
with
the cartoon guys.
It was a marketing specialist who called Sean Cunningham and said, I think the title should be The Last House on the Left. Cunningham was like, okay, called Wes. Wes said, that is a terrible title. Do not release the movie with that. And there we are. Because Wes Craven was like, what the hell does that mean? That has nothing to do with the movie. But it just, there is a ring to it. There's something kind of quietly ominous. It kind of is mysterious. It makes you interested in the story.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. It is I think also the two L's always, Last House on the Left, like it creates a ring for sure.
Alliteration.
Yeah, we love alliteration.
Yeah. I'm sure this will be shocking to you that most critics hated this movie, including Gene Siskel before he was working with Roger Ebert. He said, my objection to this film is not an objection to the graphic representations of violence, but to the fact that the movie celebrates violent acts, particularly adult male abuse of young women. I felt a professional obligation to stick around to see if there was any socially redeeming value in the remainder of the movie, and I found none. That's what Gene Siskel had to say about it.
Wow.
But as we just talked about recently on the podcast, he loved Blackula and Blackula's sequel. So he didn't hate every horror film.
I guess.
Gene Siskel gave thumbs down to Scream. Like, he was pretty anti-horror films throughout his long career as a film critic.
Come on.
Roger Ebert was always the one who could look past violence and gore and see, is the filmmaker doing something with this? So Roger Ebert famously gave Last House 3.5 stars out of 4. He was the only major film critic who really loved it. He said, it's a tough, bitter little sleeper of a movie that's 4 times as good as you'd expect. There is a moment of such sheer and unexpected terror that it beats anything since Wait Until Dark, which was a 1967 horror film with Audrey Hepburn. I tried to fit, like, what scene is he talking about? I'm like, is it the scene of the girl going into the lake? Is it the machete coming up? I'm like, it's got to be something in the forest, like one of those moments. But so he
definitely in the forest.
He liked the movie and praised it, and talked about it for years as one of the great horror films of the 70s. So that was kind of cool. Like, most people completely dismissed it or hated it, including critics. But Ebert saw something in it, saw something there with Wes Craven. Like, this guy could be, and then went on to award a lot of his films. He liked Wes Craven's New Nightmare. He liked Scream, and many of his work. And so that I always love about Roger Ebert.
I mean, it's funny because I didn't read any of the critic reviews on this movie at all. I just knew like audiences were just like losing their mind. But I mean, I think what he did was so risky and so, I guess, different. I was like, you kind of have to give him, I mean, different times, I guess, but like movies like that today are very much praised when they do something that's completely awful and disturbing. We like to see it now just because of how we are as society.
And then the last piece of the trivia I have is, due to its graphic content, the film sparked protests calling for its removal from local theaters. There was a theater that had to put out an open letter that said, no, we're not canceling this. We're going to show it. I guess the movie was banned in England it might still be banned to this day. I don't know. It was definitely banned for a while. Many countries around the world will refuse to show this movie, which I find interesting. And then there were many different cuts of the movie. As I said, there was some deleted scenes, some of that exist today, some that don't. And I'm really curious about this 3-disc Blu-ray that has 3 cuts. Like, I'm kind of
Oh
curious.
yeah.
I kind of want to look it up and see how expensive it is. I kind of want to watch like the different cuts of this movie. And the DVD I've had a DVD of this movie for a few years. It has a commentary track with some of the actors in the movie, but it doesn't have the commentary track that Wes Craven and Sean Cunningham recorded. Their track I listened to once. It was on a different DVD that was released earlier. There is, if you can find it out there, there is a really great commentary track about this film with Craven and Sean Cunningham. And then the last piece here is in the 1980s, Danny Steinman was hired by a company called Vestron Pictures to write and direct a Last House sequel. The film fell apart in pre-production due to rights issues. So we could have had a sequel in the 80s, not directed by Wes Craven. I don't know what that would have been.
I wonder if I guess maybe same concept or just
the second house.
Dead. There's the last house on the other left.
Last house on the right.
Last house on the right. I guess that honestly that probably would have been the title.
That's probably the title, right? You can't call it Last House on the Left too.
I mean, that's why like the house at the end of the street. I'm like, how? I was like, how is that a movie? I mean, the movie sucks. It's so bad.
Oh, so bad. And it came out in 2012, the year of Hunger Games and Silver Linings Playbook. And then this other movie comes out with her, and it's like you can tell they shot it earlier.
Oh yeah, it was such an early shot because it was like, this is just trash.
Yeah. But yeah, so anything else to share about Last House before we get to our final 2 segments?
I mean,
I think for the most part, especially the middle part, it holds up. And it's an important watch for any fan of horror cinema. And if you're a Wes Craven fan, at least seen a couple of his films, and you've never seen his early work, this and Hills Have Eyes, I think it's worth your time to check it out to see how he got his start.
Absolutely, yeah, because it's I hadn't seen it before, and I'm so happy I did because I think I mean, I've always known Wes Craven as the master of horror, and I made myself not like looking into him more and more, other than like what's always like presented to me. So just kind of seeing, I was like, hey, if I saw that, I'd be like, yeah, he's pretty insane, and I love it.
Yeah, I feel like in 72, if you were to see this movie, you would assume that Wes Craven was sick in the head. Absolutely,
yeah, for sure.
I don't think you'd be like, oh, in a few decades, he's going to make a drama that got an Academy Award nominations, 2 Academy Award nominations, starring Meryl Streep.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you would think that watching Last House on the Left. To think that he went from Last House to less than 30 years later, directing a prestige drama with Meryl Streep, that's kind of interesting.
That is pretty cool.
That would be a cool double feature. Watch Last House and Music of the Heart.
I've never seen Music of the Heart.
It's really good.
I didn't know about it until I saw like his IMDb, and I was just like, is that Meryl Streep? And was it Angela Bassett?
Angela Bassett, Meryl Streep, Cloris Leachman, and it's like there's nothing of Craven in there in terms of like.
That's fun.
It's like it's just a quiet, well-made drama. He doesn't put any like suspense in there. There's not a scene of her running down a hallway. Like it's just like story of a teacher as a music teacher, her life in inner city. I want to say it's like Philadelphia, and it's just like kind of her journey as a music teacher. And it's nothing special. It's nothing great, but Meryl Streep always brings something really creative and different to her roles, and she does a great job. She got an Oscar nomination, and it's also a movie I suggest to Wes Craven fans. Like you have to see his one non-horror film. It's really cool to see the kind of career he could have had.
Yeah,
I think his name also hurt. Like it's such a horror name, Wes Craven. It's so, like it sounds like a guy who makes scary movies.
It does, for sure.
So they did not use his name at all in the promotional materials of Music of the Heart.
Wait, did they really not?
Like it's on the poster at the bottom, but it's not. It's not like from the director of Scream.
from Wes Craven, Music of the Heart.
Yeah, from Wes Craven. Like that wouldn't work for Music of the Heart. People would be like,
not. What? No, not at all.
All right, so that takes us to our final 2 segments. First one, the Divine double feature. Mine's the most obvious you could imagine. I just picked the remake. I think that would be really interesting. I've never done it before, and I only saw the remake once in theaters in 2009. watching Last House, the 1972 last night, I'm like, I kind of want to watch the remake now because it'll show you what has changed in the horror genre from the 70s to the 2000s. I mean, we're talking almost 40 years difference. Same story, same kind of setup. How do they deal with it in 09 versus 72? Wildly different. You can see the evolution of the genre. I think this would be a case I would love for the Divine Double Feature to be both versions of the movie. You could really learn a lot about the genre.
I've been wanting to watch the remake so badly the past couple of days because of seeing this. I was like, I want to see what they did differently.
Yeah.
And then it's in this, and I also want to see like all the Easter eggs of stuff before. Like I would love to watch the remake again. I want to watch it this weekend really bad, but there's 1,000 things I also need to watch. Yeah. My double feature was actually a suggestion by my boyfriend was discussing the movie, which is I think a great one. Don't Breathe would be a really good one.
Ooh, yes. Okay, why Don't Breathe?
So I think Don't Breathe would be a great one because it's very much like the tables are turned on the people. Like I think it was like three. It was three of the what would be bad people, because they're breaking into this man's house, and then it turns out that man is like, no, I'm actually gonna turn the tables on you guys and kill you all.
Oh, right. Yep.
And yeah, it's just it's a nice flip of where the villains who they were always the protagonists, but like in real life they would not have been a protagonist. And then they are all of a sudden being hunted by the man who owns the house, who is also blind. He's setting up all these traps, but also there is issues with sexual assault involved with the old man having that young woman trapped in his basement, and he has been sexually assaulting her. So there's a lot of
some parallels.
There are some parallels, but it's not 100%. I like the idea of the change of like hierarchy of the villain versus the good people. And there, the main girl in it, she's breaking into this guy's house to steal all his money, but she does have some redemption to her. And yeah, I just think that would be a fun double feature with that.
That's a great idea. I love that movie. I want to say that made the second top 10 of 2016. And the sequel is awful. I watched it 2 months ago. I rented it. And it's not good. I was so bored.
It looks so bad. I was just like, I'm not going to watch this one.
I'm like, man, it's hard when in a horror franchise, when the first one's really great, like Don't Breathe is. And then the second one, I'm just like, it's not that it's badly made. I'm just bored. It's just not, it doesn't have this. I mean, it's got the main bad guy, but it just didn't have the same feel. There was something off. But the original is great. So that would be a terrific idea. Good. And then real quick, I wanted to share about the remake of Last House. So in August of 2006, Rogue Pictures finalized a deal to remake the movie with original writer-director Wes Craven as a producer. Craven said, "I'm far enough removed from these films that the remakes are a little like having grandchildren." Because some directors might struggle with that, like decades on, letting someone else remake one of their old movies. Some directors would be like, But Wes Craven was on board. Hills Have Eyes was a very successful remake in 2006. And then Wes Craven wrote Hills Have Eyes 2 with his son, Jonathan, the sequel that came out in 2007. That's the semester I was an intern at Wes Craven's company, Midnight Pictures. I was there the day they brought in directors to interview them. They brought in a couple. Wow. I want to say I was working on the computer, and it's the one day that Wes Craven came into the office. I was there for 4 months, 2 days a week. And the one day I was sitting at my desk, like working on something for my boss at the time. His name was Cody, in development. And the door opens. Usually it was like a male guy. And I look up and there's Wes Craven. He's like, "Hello." I'm like, "Hi." How may I help you?
That's so cool.
And he was there to meet with 2 or 3 potential directors for Last House on the Left. This was in the spring of 2007. I want to say the film went into production probably in 2008 because the movie didn't come out until spring of 2009. So they probably shot it in 2008. But I don't think the film was that successful, the remake. I think Hills Have Eyes did better in 2006. I don't know if there was enough pre-awareness of what Last House was to some people. Like enough to get them into the theater, but I think it did okay.
Yeah.
And I remember liking it at the time. I saw it opening weekend.
Me too, for sure. Yeah, I had to watch it in secret, I'm sure, but
the company I worked for
good.
4 months in early 07, Midnight Pictures, I learned yesterday, was created so that they could make Last House on the Left and Hills Have Eyes, the remakes. So that's kind of like
cool.
why I think they were developing other projects. That's some of them I was reading for the development guy, but it was really created so that they could get these remakes off the ground and get them in theaters. And Last House was one of the two. So yeah, cool. I would recommend that as a cool divine double feature. I mean, maybe it's not super fun to watch the same story twice, but they're so different. Like
they're very, very
it's not like it's 72 and 86. It's like 72 and 09. There's like a different feel to both of them. So
totally
very cool. All right, that takes us to our last segment, Beyond the Flick. You can only take 3 Wes Craven movies to a desert island. Andrew, what do you pick?
Okay, well, obviously Scream is number one.
Scream.
Scream number one.
Do you take any of the sequels?
I want to. I would take Scream 2 100. Yeah, for sure.
Scream 1 and Scream 2.
Yeah, and then I'm thinking probably Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, those are my 3.
Probably the hardest trying to decide what I like better from a director's career. Nightmare on Elm Street from 84 and Scream from 96 are like real close for me. Both movies I adore. Both movies are definitely not my top 10, the top 20 of all time. Those are my 2 favorite Wes Craven movies. And they're very different. Like Nightmare is more surreal and very 80s, whereas Scream is like kind of like pointing to a new future in the genre and has that element of comedy that you don't really see in Nightmare. But last night I said I gotta make a choice. I'm gonna make my choice. So I mean, really high up there in 4 or 5, like would definitely be Hills Have Eyes from 77. I think is a great horror film. Much better film, I think, than Last House from 72. I think Hills Have Eyes.
I loved it. Today. I really loved it.
More cinematic and great story.
And also it was just it. Again, also a lot happens in the daytime, but yeah, it was also a brutal movie. Like I started earlier when I messed up. The scene in the trailer with the mom and the sis and her daughter protecting the baby. Oh my God, that just terrified me as a kid. It was so real and so just shocking to see that happen to a family. I hadn't experienced anything like that before in a horror movie. And so that always stuck with me. And then now seeing that from the 1977 version, I was like, this is still awful. And like, I like the dynamic of the survivor is like one of the few survivors is like the son-in-law. I'm like, that never happens.
Right.
Like typically he's like first one off. And he ends up being like, he kind of takes over as like the family lead. And I love that aspect of that movie for sure.
Yeah. I was happy that they don't actually eat the baby.
Yeah, not like The Witch, like the opening of The Witch when they eat the baby.
Might have been too much. Wes Craven finally had he threw in everything in Last House, but in Hills of Ice, he said, I'm gonna back off on them actually killing and devouring the baby.
Yes, and also the
unlike
dog
Mother
Beast is the best character actually.
Have you seen Mother with Jennifer Lawrence? They actually like destroy and eat a baby.
Yes, I watched that in theaters, and that scene also when children terrify me. I like kids, but the thought of raising a child freaks me out. And the part when the baby breaks its neck because they're moving it too much is an ultimate fear of mine. I'm scared. I'm afraid I'm going to break a baby, and
be very delicate.
The fact that part. Out of that part, I kind of wanted to, that movie almost made me want to leave. I really hated everything with the baby stuff. Freaked me out uncontrollably. And I remember that movie got a lot of people up in arms.
Oh yeah, that was kind of a little bit of Last House with Mother people, because it was kind of promoted as this like Jennifer Lawrence thriller, and it's like, and my dad had not been to a movie theater in a couple years, and he's a huge Jennifer Lawrence fan. I got him to see that with me and my mom. I saw Mother with my parents.
Oh God.
And when they get to the end of breaking the neck of that baby, and I'm like sitting there going, oh my God. They were
Yeah,
not happy campers.
no, that's a graphic movie.
They don't mention it. They've not mentioned it since. We
I've
don't
not
talk
watched
about
it.
Mother.
I've not watched it since. So
Yeah. But so yeah, I love Hills Have Eyes. I think People Under the Stairs is very underrated. If you've never seen that movie from 91,
okay.
it's really interesting. And what one other movie he made in the 80s I forgot to mention as maybe his worst movie ever is The Hills Have Eyes 2 from 1985. Do you know that there was a sequel he wrote and directed?
I
Hills Have Eyes?
did because I looked. I saw. I looked at the IMDb.
It's horrendous.
And I don't want to watch it because I also see that bald guy's back.
He made it so he spent 3 years trying to get Nightmare on Elm Street off the ground. I believe he wrote the script in 80 or 81, and then the movie didn't come out till 84. So he was trying to get that off the ground and got to a point where he had no money. And he got an offer to direct a sequel to Hills Have Eyes, and he took it. And he said, "I need money." And you can just tell it's just a job he did for the cash, and there's no passion behind it. And he uses flashbacks from the first movie. I want to say it's 10 to 20 minutes of the runtime is just flashbacks from a movie we've already seen, including a flashback from a dog, Andrew. We zoom in on a dog's face, and then we get a flashback from the original movie.
That sounds
Which
great.
might be the only example of that in movie history. I don't know.
Maybe also because the dog in The Hills Have Eyes was amazing. I love Beast very much. Great dog. Every time the dog did something, I was like, good boy, like good job. You knocked that guy down, you bit the guy's neck, like great job.
Yeah. I'd also put so that one's not one you should seek out, but I guess if you're a Wes Craven completist. I remember when I worked at this company, they had like every movie he had made like on DVD on the shelf, like near my desk. I would like kind of like look through. they had like big binders of like production notes on some of them, and I got to talk to his assistant about the movie Cursed, which they famously made like 4 times over 2.5 years, and then the movie was a complete disaster. That's another one that didn't work out. But I would also put at the top the Scream sequels, even the much reviled Scream 3. I also adore. I like that movie. And Red Eye is fantastic. I think Red Eye, so like outside of the Scream franchise, his last great non-Scream movie is Red Eye. Like it's a quick watch, 75 minutes, really intense, very well acted. Like just fantastic actors in that. Just a really great thriller.
We just watched that 2 weeks ago as well. Because I had been wanting to watch it, and since we were doing this podcast, I was like, I definitely want to watch that movie because I was like, I've only seen his horror movies.
Yeah.
I loved it. It was so good. It was, and there was so many, and I could very much tell this is by Wes Craven. It had very much with his touch in it.
Very claustrophobic on the plane, and all the side characters.
The chase scenes were all great. Also, I was like, this is all great. I really like that one.
So yeah, if you've never seen Red Eye and you like Wes Craven's work, like check out Red Eye. I like that one a lot. And then of course, the Scream sequels and Scream 4, his last movie. That was a great one to go out on. I really love Scream 4. Mm-hmm. So my top 3 would be number 3, Wes Craven's New Nightmare from 94. Have you seen that one?
Yeah. I haven't seen it in so long, and I only watched I barely remember it. I remember, like, of course, the main plots of everything, but it's all kind of a blur, and I want to rewatch that one really badly.
It's one of my favorite sequels ever because it's about what happens when they end a franchise. What happens if the evil that was in the villainous character of the franchise is now unleashed upon the earth to all the people that were involved in the making of the franchise? Like that was a really ahead of its time, unique idea.
It's like first film. I mean, and it's cool.
It's just like, it's such a unique horror film in the history of the genre. It's like, there's never been a movie like it. It's so interesting. Wes Craven playing himself and Heather Langenkamp playing herself. And, he's writing a new Nightmare script, and she's not sure if she wants to do it, but she's like, the actress is literally in a Nightmare sequel. It's like so weird. And it gets really scary and brutal at the end, and very meta. One of the most meta movies ever. Highly recommend that. And I gotta go with number 2, A Nightmare on Elm Street, number 1, Scream. It's like by 1%, but Nightmare on Elm Street is a movie maybe I just slightly more appreciate versus Scream, which I adore as entertainment. And if I had to put on one of the two movies 10 times in the next month, I think if I was forced at gunpoint, I would pick Scream.
And that's exactly why I chose Nightmare on Elm Street. I was like, I love Nightmare. It's so iconic, and I appreciate it so much. And there are
Yeah.
so many great elements, and it's like one of his most famous movies of all time. And
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, I have to have that included, because it's and I mean, it's a great movie. And
we talked about
Scream.
Scream. We talked about Scream last December for 2.5 hours for its 25th anniversary.
We did. So like,
we've talked a lot about Wes Craven on here.
We have.
Just think of all, if you've never have met me, if never reached out to you, Andrew, think of all these hours you wouldn't have had to devote to talking Wes Craven.
I'm totally fine with it. I like it. It's good. It's like, I feel like I like learning more about these people that like, I feel like I should be researching them more and learning more about them, and then instead of just like, when it comes to me, I'll check it out. So I do like this. I do like doing the extra steps of like seeking out information, and I don't know, it's been really cool. I've always since I've been my fourth or fifth time, maybe, I don't know.
Six, I think.
Six. Oh my god. Yeah, it's cool because it gets me into the mood to watch more and more of their stuff, and I end up watching more and then doing more research, and it I don't know, it makes me understand things a little more, and I like that. So thank you for that.
Yeah. No, it's been so fun. And I think part of the reason why sometimes I lean a little bit more towards Nightmare over Scream is that Nightmare is fully Wes Craven. He wrote and directed it, spent 3 years trying to get it made. Scream is written by Kevin Williamson. So that was a case where Wes came in after the fact to make this movie based on someone else's script. So there is that element of like, my favorite Wes Craven movie, I kind of want it to be Nightmare because that's all him. Yeah. And like his blood, sweat, and tears went into that production and getting it made. Whereas Scream, he was a hired director for someone else's script. But just as pure entertainment value horror film, like if I had to watch one, Scream is just a little bit more fun. Whereas Nightmare has its moments of like some slow scenes and it's very surreal. And so but they're both, I think they're both masterpieces of the genre. And they both can coincide together as great movies. Two of my all-time favorites. We love you, Wes Craven. We miss you. He's one of my just one of the masters of not just the horror genre, but of the film medium. I just think he really delivered so often, just great stories, well told. Doesn't matter the genre. He was one of our great directors. I just adore Wes Craven, and I miss him.
Me too.
So that takes us to the end here. Andrew, thanks for being on today to talk Last House on the Left. It was so much fun to talk to you. And if you could, share where our listeners can find you online, now would be the time.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me back. I always have so much fun. Yeah, I mean, I'm on social media, AR Campbell 94. Yeah, I'm I'm also on, I do Letterboxd now, so I jumped
cool.
on there too. So I have so many movies I'm gonna go watch The Black Phone maybe this weekend.
I want to see that.
I heard it's really good. I've heard really positive things about. My brother saw it last night and really loved it. So yeah, I'm trying to. The Letterboxd has helped me get momentum of going to see movies more again. So yeah.
As we get closer to October, maybe we'll get some more new horror films. I'm excited.
We're
recording this in mid-July. I'm excited, early July kind of. I'm excited for Jordan Peele's new horror film Nope, which comes out July 22nd. By the time this airs in August, it will have been out, and we'll all know our thoughts on it. But some good horror films coming our way soon.
For sure. Can't wait.
So thanks for being here again, Andrew. Always a great time talking movies with you on Film at 50. You can follow us online at filmat50.com or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Check out my YouTube channel, Brian Rowe Video, for videos all about the Oscars. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.